I mean, I suspect that we've already had in this country quite a number of atheist presidents. I suspect.
Thomas Jefferson probably was, in a way.
Yes, well, in the 18th century, that was before Darwin, it was a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't surprise me in the least if Kennedy was an atheist. It wouldn't surprise me if Clinton was an atheist. It wouldn't surprise me if Obama's an atheist. But you cannot admit it, or you simply don't get elected. I would like to start a campaign for what are they called, lame duck presidents and senators and people to say, okay, I'm not standing for election anymore. I'm an atheist. I've been an atheist all along.
Well, that probably is a good place to get close to stopping, because I will say that one of the things that impacted upon me the most in our discussions and listening to you is the notion that we need to consciousness raise. So at least the question, just questioning the existence of a deity, doesn't become akin in our society to being evil, to being someone you don't trust. That just questioning, which is really at the basis of science, which is at the basis of progress, should be something we revere rather than revile. And so I applaud the efforts that you have made to raise people's consciousness, including my own. And I'll give the final example. One that I think I heard on this stage the first time you might have talked here was a wonderful example that is worth repeating, which is a picture at Christmas time of three children and three little kids. And one of them, and it says, and they're all playing together in this play, and one, it says,
well, they're the three wise men in the Passion, in the nativity play.
And it says this one's a Muslim child, and this one's a Christian child, and I don't know if one's a Jewish child. And then you pointed out, how dare we say a Muslim child? Why not say a
4 years old?
Or you know, a libertarian child, or a neoconservative child,
a postmodernist child.
So I think we need to, and one of the ways to do that, I think, is have frank discussions about issues that we're often afraid to discuss in public, and I'm happy that we were able to do it here. So thank you very much. We'll go for a run. Richard, come on back out for applause. Richard, come on back out.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Ron Woodworth. I finished my graduate studies here at Arizona State University and did my doctorate in religious studies at Trinity Seminary. So I really enjoy the opportunity to come in and hearing you, Dr. Dawkins. I've studied a lot, and Lawrence, this is my first time I've heard you, but thank you for your sharing as well. My main argument or critique...
You have a question?
Yes, this is it, and it's based upon my main critique.
Okay.
My main critique is I don't think that it's necessary to join together a scientific inquiry, regardless of how speculative or dramatic it may be, with an atheistic proposition. I'm not a scientist. I know several scientists. I've interviewed them from here and elsewhere, as you have. And here's my observation. As long as scientific inquiry is possible, which would be as long as matter exists, there can never be ultimate proof of God's non-existence. And I think, Dr. Lawrence, you were making that observation a little bit more, but I just want to end with this little statement, and this is Hebrews 11:2. Believe it or not.
Well, okay. I think you made your point. I think you made your point. I'll respond to this one. Does that sound good? Or you could take a crack at it too. Okay. But let me just point out. I agree, as I said before, that personally that obviously we can't. There are limits to our knowledge, and by knowledge I mean empirical knowledge, because for me that's the only kind of knowledge. But there's a famous biologist whose name I can't remember, and you might remember, who said, when I go into the laboratory, I behave as if I'm an atheist. I don't think there's someone twiddling the dials or determining the results of my experiment other so all my physical effects come from physical causes. And so actually, the key thing about science and God is that God is irrelevant to science. I think that's what another thing that Steve Weinberg said is that...
Well, maybe to you, but not to every scientist.
The good thing is I'm up here, so I get to talk.
Okay. Sorry.
What Weinberg said, which I think is really important, is that my mind just went because you brought it up and I had to be rude to you.
Thank you.
That we can forget it. I can't.
Well,
remember
I mean,
I'll come in a second.
The fact is, we discussed exactly this question. There's nothing more to be said. I mean, we both said what we had to say at some length during our discussion.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, probably. Okay. I'll remember what I was going to say, and I'll come back and answer someone's question with the answer to that one, probably. But yes, okay.
Hi. I teach public school, 8th grade, and my question is, why does the educated in this country tend to go towards universities? And then we have this sort of glut of people who are doing something great, like, physics or biology, and not so many people who can get the good word out there and have people know about science. So what can we do to address that problem?
Which problem?
All of them.
I mean, there are a lot of there are tremendous. One way we could address problems, and I think we're both interested in this, and I will say the Origins Project is particularly interested in this, is part of the problem of science education is the fact that the people who are teaching science aren't comfortable with science. That in this country, over 80% of middle school science teachers don't have science backgrounds, and that means that they're uncomfortable. I've seen it happen when my own daughter was there, was in school, that her teacher was uncomfortable talking about basic properties of nature, and that lack of comfort goes across to the students. So we have to do a better job training teachers and also encouraging people who have science backgrounds to go into teaching. And that may mean, in my opinion, doing some things that are not particularly popular, like maybe paying science teachers more.
And paying them more and respecting them. Teacher is a very honourable profession, and so qualified scientists who've done a university degree, done a PhD in science, should consider teaching as one of the best things they could possibly do with their science degree.
Absolutely, and we will, as long as we're here, we're going to do what we can to. And there's a big program here at ASU to put an advertisement to try and in fact improve the teaching of training of science teachers and to encourage kids to go into science teaching, and it's of vital importance. I do remember what I was going to say, but I'll repeat it later.
When you were talking about the possibility of life that is not on this planet, life, what do you think about the possibilities of life that is either not carbon-based or not in sacks of water? That is at a chemical level very, very different from terrestrial life.
I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
What she's saying, what about the possibility of life that basically is not chemistry?
Or not necessarily not chemical, but not sharing any elements of biochemistry with the life we're familiar with, either not based in carbon or not floating around in water.
I mean, I'm fascinated by the possibility, and we were discussing this, the possibility that a form of life might exist which is entirely different. And whenever I meet chemists, I try to persuade them to speculate about possible alternative biochemistries. I mean, could you even imagine a non-carbon-based life form, for example? And you think about what's special about carbon, its capacity to form long chains, loops, I think there's one other element that has that. That silicon has that property. Could you imagine a silicon-based life? Well, I certainly can imagine a silicon-based life, but that would be via the medium of our carbon-based life. And I could imagine some distant future in which a hole like this might be full of silicon life forms who look back and speculate about some far distant dawn age in the distant past when there was some sort of squishy carbon-based life form which gave rise to us, and the problem of the origin of life might be solved when they realized that life hadn't always been silicon-based.
It's true. In fact, that may be the next phase of evolution. Certainly, I've said it, and I believe it, that machine-based intelligence will not only happen, but once it does, it'll easily be able to outbeat biology, and biology will have to accommodate it if it wants to survive in one way or another. But let me also say that it's an example of what I think you can imagine lots of possibilities, but I think Richard put it when he talked about finding the lost keys under the lamppost. There are lots of possibilities, but since we don't know if any life can exist out there, the simplest thing is we know certain kinds of life do exist. We're an example. And so we search for that elsewhere. But there are people, and Paul Davies, one of my colleagues here, is actually trying to think of ways to look for example, could there be other life forms on Earth that we would have missed because all of our assays would be for carbon-based life? And it's hard to think of possibilities, but people are at least thinking about them. It's a long shot. It's a lot easier to look for what you know exists than what might. But it's certainly, if the key point is if we don't find life of the type we know, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And another example, Chris McKay, who is also affiliated with us and was on a stage with you and I recently, an astrobiologist, has pointed out that a number of the early experiments performed on the first mission to Mars to look for life, in fact, we now understand could have killed a variety of kinds of life before it did. And so the new experiments are being redefined. So the lack of evidence for life on Mars that was found in those first missions could simply be that they didn't understand life well enough and they actually killed the life they were looking for.
Yes, you mentioned the fact that you might be preaching to the choir or the converted in your discussion earlier regarding several of the ideas. Do you find often that you are preaching to the choir or the converted, or do you think this setting is appropriate for disseminating these ideas further down into society, or are we just stagnating with them being discussed among the intelligentsia, or is there a more appropriate way? Is there a more appropriate way to disseminate this information further?
Well, first I'll say I know very few places. I'm always proud that we can get 3,000 people from Phoenix to come to these things. So, but I will say it requires going to lots of different places, and I think it requires people. We have a bigger soapbox than some, but a lot of people say, "What can I do?" And I think each one of us who's interested in science education and reason has a forum. You go into your kids' schools or into your churches or wherever and talk about what's sensible. And we all have to be evangelists for science because God knows, forgive the expression, there are lots of people every day arguing against science around the country, and it requires the work of everyone, not just us.
I do think that scientists have a responsibility which not all of them bother with to talk widely and to stand up and be counted on some of these controversial issues. And so when people say that Lawrence and I and some of our colleagues are strident and shrill, it's because many of our colleagues just get on with their work and don't bother to stand up and say what they think. And I would appeal to scientists to, I'd almost say join us on the barricades, because we're feeling lonely.